All right, let's break this down from the ground up. For centuries, we've looked at the moon. Poets, romantics, Apollo engineers, they all saw their own thing. At its core, it was just a big rock in orbit, useful for gravity and maybe a future launch pad to Mars. But we were wrong. We were fundamentally wrong in our assumptions, as we so often are. The moon isn't ours, and never was. We were searching for signs of extraterrestrial life out in the cosmos, but it was right above our heads the whole time. Everything changed when an object entered the system. They called it 3I Atlas. It was the third interstellar visitor we'd spotted. The first was Oumuamua. Avi Loeb suggested it might be an alien sail, and honestly, he got laughed at for it. But data is data. The second was Comet Borisov, a boring run-of-the-mill comet. But the third one changed everything. While everyone on Earth was busy with, let's say, less than optimal things, arguing about borders, resources, ideology, the real story was unfolding above our heads. Astronomers with the Atlas project in Hawaii saw a dot. Algorithms analyzed its orbit and spit out an eccentricity that screamed, "This thing is from another star system." But that wasn't the main point. Its trajectory was weird. It wasn't just fast, over 150,000 kilometers per hour. It was controlled. We detected small but constant course corrections. It wasn't planetary gravity or gas emissions. It had no coma. These were deliberate maneuvers. We pointed the James Webb at it, and what we saw violated everything we thought we knew about asteroids. Its surface. It was made of titanium and osmium alloys, materials with abnormally high reflectivity, the kind you'd expect to find in a planet's core, not on the surface of a rock hurtling through space. It wasn't tumbling. It was moving smoothly, stably. This was no rock. It was a probe. Avi Loeb's idea about Oumuamua being artificial didn't seem so crazy anymore. It became obvious that 3I Atlas was an artifact. It wasn't just passing by. It was heading straight for the Earth-Moon system. And this is where it gets really interesting. When it crossed Mars's orbit, the moon answered. The seismometers we left there, the old ones from the Apollo missions and the new Chinese and American ones, all came online at the same time. And these weren't your usual moonquakes caused by tides or meteor impacts. We know what those look like. This was something else. It was a signal, structured, complex. Our entire model of the moon as a geologically dead, cooling body shattered. It wasn't what we thought. It was something else. The signals weren't coming from the crust or the deep interior. The epicenters were at a medium depth, about 70 to 100 kilometers below the surface, and they weren't random. They formed a perfect geometric grid across the entire moon. The tremors were slight, but their nature was completely abnormal. The seismic waves didn't die down like they should in solid rock. They spread across the surface and deep inside, reflecting off something that made them resonate. Our sensors picked up harmonic vibrations, like someone had struck a giant tuning fork. In the mission control centers in Houston, Beijing, and Korolyov, there was total confusion. Engineers checked their equipment, suspecting a glitch. But the data from all the stations, owned by different countries and operating on different principles, matched down to the microsecond. The moon was vibrating. It was humming at a low, barely perceptible frequency. And this hum wasn't random noise. It had a structure, a complex repeating pattern that looked like a language. At that moment, the scientific community remembered one of the strangest and most inconvenient facts from the Apollo missions, one that had been hushed up for decades, dismissed as a curiosity or a misinterpretation. November 1969, Apollo 12. Astronauts Pete Conrad and Alan Bean, having finished their work on the surface, returned to the command module. and the lunar module's ascent stage was deliberately crashed into the surface. The impact was equivalent to a ton of TNT. Scientists expected to get data on the lunar crust structure, and they did. But the result was shocking. The seismometers recorded that after the impact, the moon started to vibrate. And these vibrations didn't stop after a few minutes, like they would on Earth where water and loose rock quickly dampened them. The moon rang. It rang like a bell for nearly an hour. The phrase "rang like a bell" from the NASA report became legendary in certain circles. For most scientists, it was just proof that the moon was an extremely dry and solid body. The lack of water and the dense, monolithic structure of the crust allowed seismic waves to travel without losing energy. But for a small group of researchers, considered fringe, this was proof of the unthinkable. In 1970, two Soviet scientists, Michael Vassin and Alexander Sherbakov of the USSR Academy of Sciences, published an article titled, "Is the Moon the Creation of Alien Intelligence?" They proposed a hypothesis that mainstream science ridiculed but could never fully disprove. Their arguments were simple and disarming. Low density. The moon's average density is 3.34 grams per cubic centimeter, while Earth's is 5.51. This suggested that the moon either has a very small iron core, or it's partially hollow. Strange craters. Lunar craters, even the gigantic ones, are strangely shallow. It's as if meteorites were hitting some super strong shell beneath a thin layer of regolith, unable to punch through. Vassin and Sherbakov suggested this could be an armored hull tens of kilometers thick. Mascons. Beneath the lunar seas are mascons, areas of abnormally high gravity detected by the disturbances in satellite orbits. Mainstream science explained them as solidified flows of dense lava. Vassin and Sherbakov suggested they might not just be dense rock, but massive machinery or structural reinforcements for an artificial hull. The perfect orbit. The moon's orbit is almost perfectly circular, a great rarity for a satellite captured by a planet's gravity. What's more, the moon is tidally locked, always showing the same face to Earth, and its apparent size from Earth exactly matches the sun's, making perfect solar eclipses possible. A phenomenon many astronomers consider an incredible coincidence. Vassin and Sherbakov's hypothesis was this: the moon is not a natural satellite. It's a giant, ancient spaceship built by an unknown civilization. Perhaps its core was removed, and the hollow interior was used as a habitat. A durable outer shell was covered with kilometers of rock and dust for camouflage and protection from meteorites. This ship was placed in orbit around Earth in the distant past for an unknown purpose. Maybe as an observation post, maybe as a rescue ark, or as a guardian silently watching over the cradle of humanity. For decades, this theory was considered pseudoscientific nonsense. But now, with the moon talking, back to the approaching Three-Eye Atlas, that nonsense was starting to look frighteningly real. The new seismic data indicated that there really was some kind of structure beneath the crust, a cavity. And inside that cavity, something was waking up. The revelation that the moon might be an artificial object didn't just shake science, it destroyed it. Modern astrophysics, geology, the theory of evolution, everything built on the assumption of a natural world collapsed overnight. The first reaction from governments was to try and cover it all up. Communication channels with observatories were classified, and data on the moon's seismic activity was declared a state secret. But in the age of the global internet and independent amateur astronomers, keeping a secret this big was impossible. Leaks started almost immediately. An anonymous forum post from a European Space Agency engineer with raw seismograms. A hacked server in Beijing that leaked analytical reports into the wild. Satellite images from a private company showing strange thermal anomalies appearing near the lunar mascons. It all hit a stunned humanity like an avalanche. Chaos erupted. Financial markets crashed harder than they did during the world wars. The concept of material assets lost all meaning when a continent-sized artifact was hanging over your head. Scientists who had spent their lives proving the moon's natural origin found themselves in the position of medieval theologians who had just been shown Galileo's telescope. They were viciously attacked on live TV, their past work ridiculed on social media. But most importantly, the question itself changed. It was no longer, are we alone in the universe? It was, who are they? Our creators or our jailers? And why were they silent for millennia? The moon was no longer just a light in the night sky. It became a symbol of the greatest deception or the greatest mystery in history. Ancient myths from around the world, which scientists had dismissed as poetic metaphors, were now being read like historical chronicles. Legends of a time when there was no moon in the sky, of a great flood that could have been caused by the gravitational disturbance of installing the satellite, of gods descending from the stars. It all took on a new, sinister meaning. And the interstellar visitor, 3I Atlas, continued on its path. Its intentions were now clear. It wasn't just flying towards the Earth-Moon system, it was flying to the moon. This wasn't a scout probe. It was a key, or a messenger, or maybe the one who came to wake the sleeping guardian. The seismic activity on the moon was intensifying. It went from a faint hum to distinct rhythmic pulses. Analysts working with the data made another incredible discovery. The pulse patterns weren't random. They were incredibly complex mathematical sequences based on prime numbers and constants like pi and the golden ratio. This wasn't just a signal, it was a message, an attempt to make contact. And then, from the surface of the moon, from the center of one of the largest mascons in the Sea of Rains, came a reply. Not seismic, but electromagnetic. A short, powerful, tightly beamed radio signal sent directly at 3I Atlas. Humanity, holding its breath, witnessed a dialogue between two titans, two artifacts of unimaginable age and power. We weren't participants, just ants in an arena where gladiators were about to clash. What does it mean to be human if our entire history, our entire evolution, perhaps took place under the watchful eye of a giant observer hanging over our heads? What if our planet isn't a cradle, but a nature preserve? Or worse, a laboratory? These questions paralyzed human society. A new era began, the post-Selene era. Old geopolitical conflicts seemed like child's play. All of Earth's resources were thrown at one task, understanding what was happening. Space agencies that were competing just yesterday merged into a single project. New telescopes, hundreds of times more powerful than the James Webb, were being built in record time. Manned missions to the moon were being prepared. But this time, the goal wasn't just to collect rocks, but to try and get inside, to find an entrance into this giant sarcophagus. The hollow moon hypothesis became the central scientific theory. Scientists re-examined the Apollo data. It turned out that the astronauts had recorded strange magnetic anomalies and found processed metals in soil samples, but this data was written off as instrument error or contamination. Now it was clear, these were traces, crumbs left by those who built this world. And 3I Atlas, having received the return signal, began to slow down. Its deceleration was as inexplicable as its acceleration. It wasn't firing thrusters. It seemed to be interacting with the very fabric of space-time, shedding its colossal kinetic energy. Its destination wasn't just the moon, but the L1 Lagrange point of the Earth-Moon system, the perfect spot for stationary observation, a place where the gravity of Earth and the moon cancel each other out. Humanity was at an existential dead end. We are on the verge of the greatest discovery in our history, but this discovery could mean our end. If the moon is a guardian, who or what was it guarding us from? And isn't the arrival of 3I Atlas a signal that the threat this guardian was created for is approaching? Or is the moon a prison, and 3i Atlas is the key that will unlock it, releasing something that was locked away here eons ago. The collapse of the scientific paradigm was just the first tremor. Far more profound and devastating was the earthquake that shook the foundations of faith. Religious institutions, which for millennia had offered answers to life's biggest questions, were on the verge of collapse. At the Vatican, the Pope, after weeks of silence and prayer, delivered a historic address. He spoke of the boundless nature of God's creation, that humanity should never have considered itself the Lord's only children. He quoted Thomas Aquinas, allowing for the possibility of other worlds, and urged his flock to see this not as a threat, but as the ultimate confirmation of the Creator's omnipotence. But his words split the church. Conservative cardinals and millions of believers worldwide condemned him as a heretic. To them, the awakened moon, speaking the language of mathematics, was not God's creation, but the great diabolical illusion described in the book of Revelation. Preachers emerged calling the moon the celestial whore of Babylon and 3i Atlas, the beast from the abyss. Persecutions of scientists, accused of conspiring with the devil, began all over the world. In the Islamic world, the reaction was no less turbulent. Leading theologians cited verses from the Quran speaking of Allah as the Lord of the worlds, plural, which was traditionally interpreted as proof of other forms of life. For many Muslims, this was a sign of Allah's unsurpassed greatness. However, radical factions here proclaimed something different. They saw in the talking moon powerful jinn locked in the celestial sphere, and in 3i Atlas, a harbinger of Judgment Day. New jihadist groups emerged, declaring war not on infidels, but on the cosmic threat, calling for the destruction of telescopes and observatories as the eyes of Iblis. Judaism, with its long tradition of theological debate, fell into deep contemplation. Is humanity still the chosen people? If the creators of the moon exist, are they subject to the laws of the Torah? The questions multiplied, but there were no answers. Perhaps the most philosophically calm reaction came from the Buddhist world. The concept of multiple inhabited worlds and cycles of creation and destruction had always been part of their cosmology. The Dalai Lama said in his address that this event was merely an occasion to extend compassion to all living beings, wherever they may be, and a powerful reminder of the impermanence of all things, including human knowledge and beliefs. But on the ruins of old faiths, new ones began to sprout like poisonous mushrooms after rain. The children of Selene emerged, a cult that deified the moon as the great mother, creator, and protector. Their rituals took place at night, under the light of the awakened deity, and often ended in mass suicides in the hope of ascension. They were opposed by the cult of the key, adherents of 3i Atlas, who saw the interstellar object as a messiah who had come to free humanity from the shackles of the lunar guardian, whom they considered a jailer. Clashes between these new religions and the remnants of the old became commonplace. One thing became clear: human history as we knew it was over. We were no longer lonely children of the cosmos, looking up at the stars with curiosity. We were tenants in someone else's house, which had suddenly started showing signs of life. Our quiet, poetic companion, the silver disk in the night sky, turned out to be something else. Ancient, powerful, and utterly incomprehensible. The end of this story has not yet been written. 3i Atlas will settle into its position at the L1 point in a few months. What happens next? Nobody knows. Maybe we'll get answers to all our questions. Maybe we'll witness an event that will forever change the solar system. Or maybe the ringing of the lunar bell is not a wake-up call, but a funeral knell for a humanity that realized too late that its cozy little world was just a stage set in a grand cosmic play. We were watching the moon, but it was watching us the whole time. And now, it has woken up.